Well, first, let me say, I think that everything that I just saw offers some great promise. As most water practitioners will at least spout, I don't know if they believe this, I believe this, that more real-time and more accurate information makes for better decisions at the field level. Roric knows that, Brandon knows that, I know that. The question is how to get that translated to the average grower in our neck of the woods. We oversee a district that is 3.5 million acres, about 500,000 of which are irrigated. Those irrigated acres are required to be irrigated. We get somewhere between 8 and 14 inches of rain per year. We are primarily growing corn, alfalfa, sugar beets, and dry beans here, all of which take a pretty significant amount of supplemental irrigation water. On top of that, we have a nutrient management problem. We've got nitrates that are growing in certain areas. It is not uncommon for one of our observation wells to show us well over 10 parts per million, maybe up in the 40 to 50 parts per million neighborhood. So understanding that all of this is important, there is some challenges. Our district has been a pioneer in the use of real-time telemetry for about the past 5 years. We have about 800 units out in the field right now where you can gather real-time information on what's going on your field, not only how much water has been applied, but we can utilize soil moisture probes or small, tipping rain buckets, that sort of thing, as part of that telemetry package to find out what's happening so you can make better decisions. Guess what? 8 individuals, 8 farmers are actually using that real-time information out of 800 units out there. So there is an enormous disconnect. To your question, Dr. Neale, or as I might call you, Christopher, to your point, Christopher, we have routinely, we are big advocates of outreach. We do outreach all the time. We do producer roundtables every winter. I think we're one of only a handful of NRDs that do that, where we gather, large groups of people into a Quonset and talk about this and feed them some dinner. That is the best way to get people engaged in this. The on-farm sort of peer-to-peer work that DWFI and Extension are doing right now is critical. People like to talk to other people with dirty boots, not with shiny shoes. And with all due respect, because I know there's a lot of shiny shoes on this screen, including my own, people like to hear from people like Roric and Brandon about what it is that they're doing, so that not only can they compare and contrast, but they can brag. I think the interface that NRDs have an opportunity to be a part of, or conservation districts in the other states that are represented on this call, are utilizing competition. Not unlike what has gone on with the TAPS program here at the University of Nebraska, but we could use a yield competition. We could use a reduction in nitrogen use competition. We could use a tax rebate program on those people that live under a specified allocation of irrigation water. Those things are doable, and they will drive usage, I think, at the ground level, particularly if you tie to it some sort of certification process, some sort of end user marketing piece. I love what you all are doing. I think it's tremendous. I think that is the challenge. And I think that challenge is meetable if we sort of focus on ways that we can engage these people, and not just a business aspect. How do I improve yield? How do I reduce input costs? All that stuff. And I'm sorry to say this, but we got to make it a little bit fun too. And I think there is an opportunity to do that. I'll mute now.
Thank you, John. I was having a problem unmuting myself. I want to go back and ask Roric and Brandon. I know you have irrigated acres, but you might have rain-fed acres as well, right? And so the question is, do you manage your nitrogen applications differentially, whether you're on a rain-fed or in an irrigated field?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think I've been a part of the nitrate policy task force in Nebraska now for 2 years. And I think it's unquestionably probably one of the greatest challenges that we have as a state is figuring out what that process looked like. John just led us into that conversation is how do we make this engaging? How do we figure out how do we get adoption? and move the needle in a way that makes the most sense. So absolutely, is 1.2 pounds of nitrogen and fully irrigated a realistic option in today's production world? First, if you put the economics with it, the cost of pumping that gallon of water, the cost of a nitrogen unit a year ago was roughly 30 cents a pound. Today it's $1. And so all at once you have to think in terms of what that means to your economic or ROI in terms of the stewardship and conservation, not simply your profit, but more as how do you start to think in your operation back that way. This tool would help some of those things, but I think you got to ask a bigger question of if you're pulling out specific segments utilizing this tool without recognizing the total system, which I think is where you're attacking it, and trying to activate that piece. I think that we're probably missing a few steps here that I think would really help narrow down the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. But that is also, I know it's year one. So what is year two and year three? That second or third date, I guess. And then what's the mortar between the bricks? Because actually you are building the building right now, but you know, what will take that to deliver it to what John suggested is a TAPS-like competition, is in efficiencies and ROI and a compelling continuous improvement process. Jonathan talked about sustainability. I dislike that word. I don't think that it's in our own operation. I want to look at it more as a stewardship and conservation initiative that puts us in a continuous improvement. And I'll leave it at that. I think that's in terms of where we're all headed, but to simply just pull it out as a specific segment, that makes it tough for a producer and it pigeonholes some, and it creates a bit of a barrier for adoption. And I'll mute, John.
So Brandon, do you want to add to that? And I might pose an additional add-on question to you. One of the aspects of Dawn is the forecasting tool, right? That's going to be part of it, right? Where if you knew it was going to rain with a certain probability in 3 days or in 5 days or in 7 days, how would you manage your nitrogen differently, for example? So go.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, first of all, on our farm, we're basically 100% irrigated, but that means we still have pivot corners at our dry land, and we always manage those different. Make sure we're putting on more of the nitrogen that relates to the projected yield on those fields. Where I see this being beneficial is that if we could predict rainfall, if we could predict when it's going to happen, you know, we could really look at honing in on some of those processes that we're doing on the farm already. Part of our goal is to put a certain amount down ahead of planting. So maybe it's based on some research we had done through on-farm research, you know, maybe 75 pounds to 100 pounds of N up front. Well, then maybe we can time the back half of that better. If we know that there's projected rainfall or a rainy period, we can get it ahead of that rainfall so we can utilize that in a growing season better. Being able to manage the irrigation aspect of, well, it looks like I need to run my pivot, but if we have a process of really honing in on if the rain is coming, maybe we hold off 2 or 3 days, which in our case is probably not going to make or break the crop if we delay that irrigation process. And we've done some of that instinctively on the farm, like looking at weather forecasts saying, I know the agronomist said to start it, but we're not going to do that because it looks like we're going to get rain. Let's manage it accordingly, because I don't want to lose the water that I'm spending money on, and I want to be able to grab the water that's coming out of the sky as well. And so it becomes a great process, that a great tool that we can utilize on the farm on our own operation. You know, we're not a huge operation. Most of our stuff's really close together, so we can manage it a little better. But if we can start to really dive into those areas, I think we can do a better job of reducing our nitrogen load, of better utilizing our water from irrigation sources as well.
Yeah, I want to add in that this is exactly what the irrigation scheduling is doing. Like Ximing Cai and Chris and Neale. So we incorporated both as a predictive skill for the next 2 weeks come, and also know we have the running the crop. We know also how much the water actually be demanded by this crop in the next 2 weeks in potential, and then put all these together to give you a suggestion of what is option to taking irrigation now or next day or later, which have also will be a cost effective related in that way.
I'd have one comment to that quickly is we have managed from 1-day load control all the way up to 7-day load control now as a result of soil moisture probes and weather stations, and that is a consideration. So in your model, when you start looking at 7 straight days of being off 12 hours, basically from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., that changes the model as well too, in terms of what your well capacity and resiliency is to capture that or anticipate that. So if that happened to play into that Don model, I think that have some value as well too.
Yeah,
I
Roric.
think Ximing can add it into that. This is where we actually incorporate. So in his model, we actually ask the farmer to feed in the information, the soil moisture, for example, sensor, and that will data assimilation to improve the forecast of the next coming days. And the forecast, as I said, it's not just 1 day. Okay, we are progressively doing every day update. So when the new information come, that scheduling will change as well.
Yeah, we did some research before by testing different lengths of forecast, starting from like 3 days, 7 days, and 14 days. And we found out, I mean, that's kind of old research, based on the uncertainty involved, anyway, if the forecast is longer than 2 weeks, it does not make any sense. So we try to identify, given a forecast scale, we try to identify what is the how many days forecast we could use, which could generate helpful information.
A high level of confidence in 7 days would be really, really helpful. Really helpful. Beyond that, it's tough.
That's right. Yeah. I just want to say a few words about the novelty of this project. So many people are doing measurements, remote sensing sensors. Many people, a lot of people are working on models or predictions. But just ask ourselves, how many of those measurements, observations, or modeling results are really used? Not many. So in order to get them involved, really used, or to be truly useful for end users like farmers, so there is a lot of work to do. So that's why our research team needs to work with the extension. At some point, our education team will also have some impact on farmers and make them understand some information would be valuable.
I have 2 things to that. Is Brandon said it best, there is a ton of silos of information and technologies that are being put in front of us nearly every day, and they come through our office door nearly every day. And the next available process, but I think it's important. I'm a 3rd generation. This is my 40th crop, and my son, he's in his 10th, and as a 4th generation. But if we can't put it in the palm of your hand and basically have a red, green, yellow type of opportunity and prioritize those fields. In other words, Brandon said it best. If I have 60 fields, doesn't matter what size they are, but it's 60 different fields that I have to look at, then you better be able to set your stopwatch, and it better be at a glance that the compelling part of your dashboard needs to direct us, to send us to the ones of whatever that criteria or prioritization that you develop out of the Don project. We need to be able to customize that to a regional basis, which I see you're trying to accomplish, but then allow producers like myself and Brandon to be able to say, hey, that I want to be able to look at what this means to us and move that decision as well too. So I'm just answering your question, Melissa, what you wanted to be able to tell the shiny shoes, and that literally is it, is a compilation. Tackling a dashboard it's a big one here, because without some type of customization per person, per region, that's a tall task.
Yeah, I think, Robert, it's really important to talk to you guys, and that's where we started the whole project of trying to engage the stakeholders to tell us what you want to do, and we can try to make it work. And at the beginning design, we are centered on centered our design of the user's need. For example, you have so many data measurement sensing, and as Ximing asked, have you allowed the others to use your data so that they can integrate your data into the model decisions you are going to use? So that is where the two-way interaction between the stakeholders and the modelers can really working together to develop some specialized tool you can have. So if, for example, you are working on your field and you measure soil moisture and you entered into dashboard, here is what the soil moisture will measure, tell me what is the next schedule for irrigation. Then that's where the Don, like Ximing's group, will say, okay, assimilate your data. I'm going to tell you, because giving the rain forecast that we have and your soil moisture condition in your field and also your crop growing condition, what we are suggesting, these two kind of scenarios you can choose. So something like that is a two-way interaction will be very, very crucial for the success of the Don.
Yeah, good point, Liang, and also remembering again that there's a wide range of farming, right? Where some farmers have all those sensors and whatever, and others don't. Others are irrigating the way they learned from their grandfather, let's say, right, or so forth, and they're doing business as usual. And we must not forget the observation that Roric made about load control, where literally the power company can turn off your pivot, okay? And so that puts you behind if you're needing to irrigate, and it's the hot time of the season, or it's a critical time of the season, like when corn is pollinating. I mean, these things need to be captured. In addition to that, there are wells in Nebraska, right, because of the water table going down and so forth, they just don't have the capacity, right? And I think Bandon and Roric could comment, and John, they don't have the capacity to keep up with the demand. Isn't that right, John, for example? So these things need to be incorporated in this logic of Dawn. And we do need to do some events and bring farmers together this winter to have these discussions so we can capture all this knowledge and build it into the Dawn decision support to make it more useful.
Yes, and that's on that end, I want to add that this is where we call the system modeling. We are actually trying to take whatever this information in a larger scale way from the remote sensing data, from the weather forecast. For all these, we are integrating the model first. And we use the default controlled availability, for example, the water, so groundwater, and then to simulate what it will be taken if so many people is using the same area of the aquifer, how that water supply will be concerned. And all that is supposed to be in the big system dealing with that. So, but again, still need the feedback from the user's point of view. If you are using this and you have these sensors in your field, and if you're willing to share your experience using the data, and then the other farmers in your neighborhood, they could share the similar information even though they don't have a remote sensing, because the model calibrated by your field will produce a better results for the region around you.
John, you unmuted, so I'll let you go ahead and comment because you were about to say.
Well, Christopher, two things. I would be glad to host a big meeting out here of, the wide swath of different kind of producers we've got. We still have people that use flip phones here, and then we have people like Roric who, have the latest and greatest attached to their their belt. We also have 50-year-old pivots, to your point earlier. We have people with VRI panels. We have people with the original panel that was installed in 1960. So I think that this tool, you know, sort of to the point that Dr. Liang was just making, this tool can be useful to both types of producers. You don't have to have grid VRI technology. You don't have to have your field even EC mapped, even if you are making a better irrigation timing decision based solely on forecasting or solely on a moisture probe that may be out in your field. You're better off than you may have been otherwise. And so I think having that discussion, understanding that there are people that are going to be able to use this technology to the same point that they may be using FieldNet or some other technology, subscriber technology in their fields today, as well as those that, you know, don't have anything other than, as you put it, you know, the way their grandfather told them to irrigate. We still have a lot of people like that. And we have a varying, you know, varying size of farms, varying equity in farms, varying ability to even play a role in our cost share program. It's hard to cost share with someone who cannot share the cost, given maybe their financial challenges. So back to the point that you were making, we do need to make sure that we understand that there is a wide spectrum of agriculture people, not just in Nebraska, but all over the place. And I would be glad if this group or, you know, some subset of it wanted to do a meeting over the winter. We generally do our big producer roundtables in January and February. We usually get 200-300 people in a room. You know, that might be a nice start. So.
Great, John. Thanks for the offer. We're getting close to the end, but I do want to discuss one more subject here that's in the chat box, which is sharing data, right? What's your view, Brandon and Roric, as producers on sharing some of your data for research, and how do you, and this question goes to John as well, typical colleagues of yours out that are farmers, what are their view of sharing their data and the time it takes and the and privacy and all that? Go ahead and comment, any of you, on that topic.
You know, I'd say we're probably a little bit of the anomaly out here, is that we're pretty willing to share data. You know, those of us who've been involved with these sort of research projects or understand the importance of collaborative approach. So, you know, we've been pretty open with most of our data, you know, obviously not financial type data. But if we're trying to talk ROI, you know, probably institute some of the data they need for that as well. You know, I think there's a lot of people that get leery of it because they don't know who's going to be doing what with the data. But when we start talking, the way I've approached it is, if we're talking irrigation usage, you know, nitrogen amounts, you know, yield, any of that important stuff, that it's not that big a deal. You know, we're not trying to hide any secrets out here. You know, we're trying to figure out how to make things better. So that's been a little bit of our approach over the years. And I know, you know, maybe Roric's got a different approach as well.
Nope, straight up transparent. I'm the same way. Financial data, you know, obviously is probably off limits, but in terms of an ROI or building a profitable acre, absolutely. Soil moisture data, weather station data. I think you're spot on in terms of but you're also picking on two, as John would put it, got the shiny stuff sitting in our shops or in our fields. And so you flip that around, and that reluctance to share data, even if they're producing data. I mean, it could be only just through My John Deere or through Trimble, simply just collecting field activities as planted. I mean, those are the kinds of things that some people just don't put value in that data yet. But now you've got providers like Nutrien or Simplot or Helena. I mean, there's a lot of the co-ops are building very robust tools that obviously keep producers in their coming back to their coming back to their facilities to purchase inputs. So I mean, there's data abounding. Jonathan stated earlier about a petabyte. You know, we're in a couple terabytes a month in what we're producing, and we're asking anybody we can find to help us with that data. So that's a tough one, Christopher and group, to really think that in a big scheme of things that you'll be able to get enough relevant data. John, I don't know what's the policy on sharing water data. You just aggregate it, I think, don't you? You don't really even break it down to even sections or anything, do you yet?
Yeah, we aggregate it by county generally. If we get a more specific question than that, we will break it down further. You know, if somebody's looking for Roric Paulman's water usage information, I would have to get a release from Roric Paulman to provide that. There are ways around that, of course, and there are ways that we have addressed that even publicly. Many NRDs publish you know, sort of a color graph overlaid on a map. So you generally know where Roric's farm is. You generally know what color his water usage is. It's sort of a 2 cube by half way of sharing data. I will tell you that people in our neck of the woods, in our 4 1/3 counties that we represent, are pretty used to sharing data with us, and they're pretty open to sharing it with others. Again, all the way across that spectrum. And I really think that's because we've dealt with some of these water usage, land usage, different tillage practices kind of questions early on as we were building a regulatory scheme here, so that it's just a matter of course. You know, I will go out onto Bandon Farm, let's say Bandon Farm's down at Malbida. We can go out onto Brandon's farm. We can do a field inspection. We're going to read his flow meter. We're going to talk to him about his practices. And he's going to get pretty comfortable with our staff sharing that information. Now, sharing it beyond that, you know, that would be a discussion that we would have to have with individual landowners. We've got those kinds of landowners, sort of like Roric, that are saying, Roric and Brandon, that are saying, oh, this is fine to share. And then we got others that, you know, treat it as if it's state secrets. I don't really have much of a concern about it. We do it routinely, but we do have little policies in place to protect those that want to be protected.
Well, thank you. It looks like we're coming up on 15 minutes over the allotted time. I think we should probably end the session. I really enjoyed the discussions. I think this has been very productive. Thank you, Roric, John, and Brandon, for your insights. Thank you for all the presenters for laying the project out. And thank you for USDA NIFA Sustainable Ag System Program for funding this effort. And we hope that over the course of the project, we will be able to generate a lot of good information and a decision support tool that farmers can use, and it can have an impact on the ground. Liang, would you like to say some final words?
Yeah, I just want to thanks Chris setting up and give us the opportunity, and also thanks John and Brandon and Roric to really discuss with us what you need. And this is an engagement we really need to in the future. Hope we can work with you more closely to get your need into it, and so we can design the DAWN decision support tools. So really, thank you very, very much.
Very good. And remember, this has been recorded, and we will be providing a link so that you can review it. And I hope everyone's okay for us to divulge this information on our website, right? I think it's important to get the message out there that this could be a part of the process. Okay, thank you very much for everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah.
And I presume Brandon and Roric are going to go back into the harvesters with their teams because they're in the middle of the harvest season, right? Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
Have a good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.